And the idea of writing home was to actually look at people who actually don't come from South Africa, but for whom South Africa has become their home. For many, it is people in Africa who've moved down, as Philippa Kabali-Kagwa, who is our main item on the agenda this afternoon. And for people like Epiphany, who's come from Rwanda. I came from England, Nancy came from England. Most of us, or many of us, are immigrants. And what is it about Cape Town and Africa that makes it our home? Is it our home? Do we still refer to the places that we were born in as our homes? It's an interesting question to ask. And Philippa has just brought out a book called Flame and Song, which is just literally, the ink is still wet on this, I can tell you. And she was at the book fair last week, and we've sort of like preempted her official launch, which is on the 4th of October at the Book Lounge, so please go along there. Her book is about her travels from Uganda originally, and I'm not going to preempt this because Philippa's going to tell you. And Philippa is in conversation with Deirdre Prins-Solani, who is a heritage specialist. And what I'd like you to do is, when I get you up here, which will be in the next 30 seconds, I'd like you to give a little story about yourselves and where you come from and what makes writing home so very special. After Deirdre and Philippa have been in conversation, we'll have a bit of a break, so you will get some East African tea from our very special friend outside called Rita Foy, who runs a restaurant and a cafe, a tea room, which we'll tell you a little bit about later. And then we'll come back and we'll do some story sharing. And Epiphany is going to start that off. And then we have Epiphany's at the back. Sorry, I'm confusing everybody today. Epiphany's here. And Nomi, who calls herself Black Queen, is also going to do a presentation. And then it's over to you. You can tell your story. We give everybody 13 minutes, so that is like the magic number. Okay, enough from me. You don't need to hear my voice any longer. I'd like to invite Philippa and Deirdre to take their seats.
Good afternoon. I'm Philippa Namutebi Kabali-Kagwa. Yes, I'm a storyteller, I'm a poet, I'm a coach, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, and a dada. And I'm going to talk about my story, which is about my life, so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time introducing myself. Woman's Zone is also one of the places I call home, so it is good to be sitting at home, talking about home, and talking about writing home with my sister here.
Okay, just very briefly, because this is about Philippa. My name is Deirdre Prins-Solani. I was born in Soweto, traveled to Cape Town via the Free State, and this is partly my home. I have another home in Kenya. I work as a heritage specialist, and it's quite ironic because I leave for Canada on Friday to convene a roundtable of community librarians from Honduras and other parts of South America and Africa. And I love stories of home because I think they're very complicated and very complex. It's not just about being an immigrant. Just this morning we buried an aunt of mine, a very much loved aunt, and at the funeral we had somebody arrive who hadn't seen family. They grew up together with my mother and her siblings in Wesley Street, Claremont, from which they were forcibly removed, and she came back to Cape Town a week ago. So 60 years later, after living in Denmark, she arrives to come and greet us as family. And it just makes this notion of home, as I said, very, very complex and very layered. And the conversation with Philippa, for me, is a very exciting one because I think that it runs parallel to so many narratives about belonging and home, and it's not just about place, physical place and geographical place. It's about home as in a memory landscape and home in the virtual worlds. So this conversation is long anticipated, and the fact that Flame and Song is here is incredible. There have been many challenges along the way, but that will come out in our conversation, I hope.
We light the fire, right? And we welcome everybody, those who are with us, those who have gone before us, into the space as we talk about home, those who are far away. I was saying we light the home fire, just lit the candle, and we welcome into the space all of you. Beautiful. Echoes of a journey, dry and parched, restless, like the salt-filled breezes of this land. I leave the mountain, draped in its cloth, early in the morning, and journey northward bound for where the equator wraps itself round the waist of my first home. I arrive in the land of the great lake Narubali, to the buzz of mosquitoes and lake flies, and the warm, humid sky of dusk's purply embrace. I am home. I know I shall wake up in a land covered in green banana plantations, mango trees and jackfruit, reservoir of the stories and songs of my youth. Maybe this land will quench my thirst. I rise to the smell of rain on the red soil of family, Daddy eating pawpaw with relish, Mama drinking another cup of tea, Estella hurrying slowly to go to town, and the children, Estella, Elsa, Michelle, Faye, and Sente, screaming with laughter in the garden. I drink from this love potent in each life. I drink too of the embraced, unspoken, unasked, ununderstood. Maliza silent in her room. Faye and Chris, their smiles now just pictures on the wall, beautiful lives held captive in twisted urns. My heart aches with love expressed and unexpressed. Screaming to be released, the unspoken festers, holding us hostage, refusing to let us go even as we have never let it go. The waters in the pot of my first home are bittersweet. The thirst remains. 12 hours later, I journey east to my second home, land of the Rift Valley, Mounts Kenya and Kilimanjaro, flying high through blue skies, expectant. I go to celebrate coming of age with sisters turning 40. It has been a long time. We meet in this land that too thirsts for water, savanna grasslands, thorn trees, brown hills undulating. I come here to drink from the gourd of friendship. Will this thirst be quenched? Kamiti, farms rich in coffee trees, tea with Mama Joki. Boma, domes rising over 5 acres, squeals of delight and surprise, teenagers once again. Athi River, laughter, tears, silence. As we reminisce and celebrate, share the gifts of lives lived. Karen, Buruburu, Hurlingham, visiting the places of my youth. Have I drunk enough? I leave once again, my soul soaked in home waters, marinated with myriads of spokens and unspokens, seen and unseen, embraced and unembraced. I return south to the home by the mountain and the sea, quenched, rooted deeper in red soil, Savannah lands and sand.
Thank you so much, Philippa. We started at the end of the book, if anybody. Once you have your copy, you'll see it's the last poem. I think we'll start our conversation on a very serious note. Okay. There's a very interesting African philosopher who now lives in the Caribbean called De Pelchen. I don't know how many of you have encountered his work at all, De Pelchen. He's originally from the Congo. And he's done a very, very interesting critique of the ways in which history has been written on the African continent, particularly histories of liberation and struggle and hardship. And he does a comparative between the history that was written of the liberation struggle in Senegal and one of my favorite books, Simbeni Osmani's God's Bits of Hood. And he says, if we were to read what the historians say about the Senegal liberation struggle, you would think that all of the resistance were men, and that the battle was won by men. But if you read Simbeni Osmani's work, God's Bits of Hood, women are the main protagonists of the book, and the men sort of feature on the side. And he begins to question why that happens, and he talks about the ways in which archives get constructed, because that's where historians source their material, isn't it? They get their maps and their data from there. And he says that by writing history from the archives, which is uninterrogated or unquestioned, we begin to write a history that is skewed. And I remember, Philippa, when you were talking about your book, which was a very, very long-term project, which you can talk about a little bit more. I remember that in some of our conversations, you were really painfully engaging with whether or not your story was worthy, whether it was worth being told. And there were all sorts of reasons that were given. Social class, whether or not you were part of the liberation movement or not, where you are now as opposed to where you were. And I think that's partly what De Pelchen is referring to. He's referring to the fact that history is written from the archive, and an archive that is not interrogated does not allow for these kinds of layers and the kinds of differences in the articulations of the past or the present. So the first question would really be for you to share some of your moments of this internal conversation that you had with yourself about why me, why is this necessary, and what some of the aha moments were for you in the writing process.
Sure, okay, that's, I think, yeah, the process of writing, I think my daughter always says, you know, but what story do you have to tell? You're just an ordinary person, and that's true. I think in many ways, when one looks at their story, it's just you know, you woke up, you've lived, you've gone to school. So, you know, I'm not a CEO of anything, I'm not an MP, I've not led any political movement, I'm not a celebrity, so why would anybody be interested in my story? That was one of the questions that I really grappled with. And when people tell stories of Africa, it's often about poverty, or it's about people fleeing deep conflict. Those are the stories that are told. Or you have a rural background and you've made it from your rural background to in the city. That's not my life either. So why should my story be told? And so I wrestled with that. But the writing started with a grieving process, and it was saying, I'm living here in Cape Town. My parents now have both died. It's 2012. Well, I started before that, but who am I now? That was the question I was grappling with. And in conversations with other people, I realized a lot of people are asking that question. Who am I now? Why am I here? Uganda turned 50, and I was thinking, all people talk about Uganda as Idi Amin, the economic war, the colonial experience, HIV and AIDS. other things happened in Uganda, like my life, you know. And so my thing was, how do we interrogate? You know, that thing of every story matters, and how do I present a picture of Africa that is multi-layered and captures everything of that continent? That was, and I thought, yes, that's worth knowing. And then I read a little bit here to someone, and I shared this with someone, and I read a poem there with someone, and I found people who I didn't expect to relate to my story related to my story. And that was like, okay, maybe there is something here that I can share, and that maybe all of us in our ordinariness have stories to tell, because most of us are just ordinary people anyway, and those stories need to be told. And when you watch movies and things, you're watching stories of mostly people from the States or Europe, and they're middle-class people, or they're just everyday people like us. And we like those movies because we can relate to them, so I thought, let me dare. And then a few people encouraged me, and there. So.
Thank you very much, Philippa. I think one of the things that also echoes from our numerous conversations is the notion of valuing what is called ordinary. I think that part of what Women's Zone does, and many other initiatives around the African continent, is to turn things on its head as to what is valued. And what you've effectively done is to say that yes, there are those stories of the great leaders of many kinds, and those are wonderful, but that's not the only way of valuing contributions and valuing story. That is not what makes a continent or makes a country rich in any way.
And there's another thing of feeling that I also think I come from a generation that is hurting. You know, we lived in Uganda through a difficult period, a very difficult period, and we watched our parents live through a difficult period. But I don't think we've opened it enough to talk about it. So many of my peers live in other parts of the world because of the moment that we were born and where we lived. And we haven't spoken about them. And our children don't know, and if they don't know, then they won't know. And sometimes they live in places and feel small. And they need to know that they stand on shoulders of great people and giants and compassionate people. And I wanted that story, and I wanted my story to invite other people to tell their stories. That was very much an invitation. Tell your story, please. I'm ordinary. Be ordinary with me. Tell me your story. That was really the invitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippa. What are some of the moments of wrestling with home that you had to engage with, and that you reflect on in Flame and Song? And we've invited you to read extracts from the book. It's been very hard for Philippa to read because she's used to the computer, the screen, and reading Flame and Song on the screen, and suddenly there's a book. It's two different formats.
Yeah. It changes completely, and I really am an oral storyteller, and a writer, so it's shifting from one modality to the other. It's hard. I want to read this. It gives you a picture of where I grew up, and I want to read this poem. It's like on page 26. It's early, because I don't think anybody's going to read it the way I hear it in my head. The adults sit upright on the dining room chairs in the sitting room turned concert hall. The staircase, a dark wooden backdrop to the stage. Somebody welcomes them. Item number 1. All the children singing and dancing Nora's Indian song. Mogo wali mali mali, mogo wali mali, eva pali, teva pali, chakara chakara, shugari shari. Foreign words that are probably incorrect. Hand and leg movements imperfect, faces beaming. Next, Joyce's song. Choir in place, hands together and Sikwendera, sikwendera, sipiriti, sipiriti, sikwendera, sikwendera, oh sipiriti. Oh, oh, oh sipiriti. Oh, 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 sipiriti. The parents clap, the performers move on with glee to the finale, the Bakisimba dance. The white enamel basin now a throbbing drum. Orungutiza, orungutiza, olungutizo lokutwala mpakusimba buktupu buktupu. Dancers in line, sweaters on hip, and the singers start. Tweyaze, walalala kawete memungere chupana ulagala. Tweyaze, walalala kawete memungere chupana ulagala. The dancers march on, kneel down, clasped hands move left, clasped hands move right, and then they stand. Hips swivel this way and that, feet stepping steady to the beat, hands clapping and ululating. The audience joins in. The basin drum climaxes. Do do do, do 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 do, do do do, do 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 do, do 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 do. Bah! The concert ends, eyes shining. The hat is passed around. The sweet promise of tomorrow. And that was one of the things we did, concerts for the parents so we'd get money for sweets whenever the cousins came.
Thank you. I'm going to skip a few. Again, throughout the book, there's reverberations of loss. You speak of loss of country, loss of parents, loss of loved ones. And I want perhaps if you could again reflect on some of those, the reflections that you've had in the book.
So, let me give you some context, because you don't know the story, right? But maybe I shouldn't tell you, so you buy the book. Not too much. But it's really about leaving Uganda. I grew up in Uganda, and in 1977 we left Uganda, and there was a moment when a family of 5 children and 2 parents was spread in 4 different places, in Ethiopia, in America, in Kenya, and in Uganda. And actually, I didn't realize, it hit me most starkly when I started writing the book, of the loss of the intimate family unit for a moment, and the extended family, because we're Africans, you always had an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, somebody staying. So all of a sudden you go from having this intimate and extended family to being spread all over the place. And so that was one sense of loss. And going back to Uganda actually in the 80s was also another sense of loss, because we left Addis, which was relatively peace, to live back in Kampala, and there were gunshots at night, and so and coming home and finding home a painful place to be and a difficult place to be, and asking my dad, why did you bring us back here? And then there was loss of people, the loss of my uncle, the loss of my brothers and sisters. It's interesting, my siblings who had cerebral palsy, when they passed away, I was here. And it's only in writing that I realized how, when they died, I didn't have time to grieve. I was becoming a mother, and so that was more important, and I couldn't go home to grieve. So there's been more, so so there's various things. I think the one thing was also the dislocated grieving. We have rituals of grieving, when you grieve and people come around, there's the vigil that's kept, there's the body coming home and staying at home, there's the service, there's a lot of things around grieving. And grieving here, or in Namibia, let's say grieving here for my dad, in a place where nobody knew him. I went and I had the funeral and I was surrounded by family, and then came back here, and life, it was like nothing had happened. Life continued in Cape Town. And how do you work with that sense of having to continue with your life normally, and yet something is so broken inside you, and straddling that space of brokenness and normality, and having to mother your children in that dislocation has been quite a challenge.
How do you say you've integrated that? What are some of the ways in which you've either brought home, as we say, or you've taken home to be able to integrate? And
how have I done that? I don't know. I think some of it is in the sharing and the storytelling. Finding people who know. And Jilly's sitting at the back there. I remember when I came back from my mother's funeral, and I think it was my mom's funeral, and we sat in a cafe and I was telling her, and she was so fascinated by what we did. And just that telling her, for me, was a healing thing. I remember my friend Vuyo, you know Vuyo Koyana, and she, when I came back from my mother's funeral, we hadn't spoken, but she came from her house and came and sat in my sitting room, and we talked forever. Because she said, Philippa, I cannot say sorry over the phone, because that is not the way that we grieve. And so there's been those little things that people do or have done that have enabled that. And then the writing for me has been a space where I could just, I could process and make sense of. And the thing is, I'll tell you something. Sometime after my mom died, my neighbor died. We live in Plattekloof, you know, we live behind our gates in our houses. You kind of wave at your neighbors. You don't always go into each other's houses. But there's this old couple that lived across the road, and I used to talk to them, and the husband was really sick. And he came to our house for my husband's birthday, and then one day I was standing in my kitchen, and my housekeeper said, there's an ambulance at the old lady's house, something's happened. So I went, because that's what we do, right? Something's happened to your neighbors, you go. And I found the people there, and they said, oh, we think the old man is dead. So I walked into the house, because that's what you do, and I called her and I said, where are you? And she was in the bedroom, and she came out, and it's an old Afrikaans lady, and she said, Philippa, he's gone. And I said, oh, sorry, and I hugged her, and then we went into the room, she took me in, and the body was still there, and the daughter was standing there. And I told her, it's fine, I'll stand here until the rest of the family did. And I stood there and made cups of tea, and her daughter came with the baby, and I held the baby, and I said, go see your dad. And, you know, and then I thought, the church, she goes to church. Has anybody told their church? So I looked in the telephone directory, and I found the church, and I said, you know this person, her husband has just died, she needs you guys to come. You know, and I stayed there for a while, and you know, someone would have found it invasive. For me, that's what you do, that's what we do. So it's sometimes just taking my practices of what I do at home and do them to other people, because people have done them for me, and so I think people need them, and if you don't know, I'll teach you, this is how we breathe.
Thank you so much, Philippa. I think it speaks to this amazingly powerful gift that we have of having community, and having community that's so diverse, and we bring together different practices, and we learn new modalities of healing and supporting each other. Thank you. There's something about your book that is so sensual. Sensual. I'm going to repeat that. You know, it's in the mother tongue, in the use of your mother tongue, which is beautiful. In the food, you always talk picking the fruits from the trees, and the cooking of the food by the mothers, and helping with the cooking and so on. And I wondered if you could perhaps reflect a little bit on that and read perhaps an extract, because I think that for many of us who call home and home are in different places, be it provincial or be it national or whatever, very often it's the tongue. It's like you can't explain. You know, not going back to Mombasa for 2 years, I can smell it. And don't ask me to describe the smell, because it's partly garbage that's not being collected, but it's still, there is something that there is in that air that I miss. And I thought it would be wonderful to share some of that with us here, because home is not necessarily only a brain construct. It's very much a sensual construct about the tastes and the sounds and the smells.
So this is in my early days. It was a Sunday. We were having guests for lunch. The house was full of noise and activity. Someone was vacuum cleaning, the tables were being polished and dusted. Someone else was cleaning Mama's favorite cutlery and china. The smells from the kitchen. Roast chicken and potatoes, succulent fillets, piñeba ni kamalea, groundnut sauce with smoked bamboo shoots, a delicacy from my mother's part of the world. They all filled the air, stirring my salivary glands. Wherever I went in the house, I heard, "Not here, Philippa. Why don't you go outside and play? But don't climb any trees, and don't get your clothes dirty." Mama had invited a Russian lady for lunch. I had no idea what Russians were, but clearly this was an important day. The car drove up the driveway and out came Mama, Daddy, and a woman. She was much taller than Mama, and her skin was almost white. She spoke English with a strong accent. This was the woman Mama had met when she went to Russia as part of a Ugandan delegation. The strongest memory Mama had was that they could not do anything on their own. As soon as they stepped out of the hotel to explore, someone appeared either to walk with them or to take them back to the rest of the group. This one woman had been so intrigued when Mama had told her that in Uganda you could go anywhere alone. And Mama promised to invite her home for that meal if she ever came to Uganda.
Thank you. Thanks, Philippa. I think the last one that question I'm going to ask before we ask you to read your poem. Your spiritual life and your faith again reverberates throughout the book, and in many ways identifies home as being faith-based and being a spirit person. And again, in our many conversations, I think I'm at a disadvantage. There's been a conversation around returning to home, also being about winning back or gaining back some of the traditional practices that were given up and that were forfeited because of a Christian upbringing. And so moving towards a sense of self and a sense of belonging, and a sense of belonging in the inner landscape. There's also been about seeking, remembering that there were rituals that you knew about, but they are vague memory because they were not done. You just witnessed them, or you had a teacher who taught you a dance, and then never again was it ever formed for you. And I wanted perhaps just a reflection on that, because I think that again, if one looks at movements of people, both within South Africa but across the African continent, there have been powerful religious forces that have played a role in the ideas or the sense of what belonging is, belonging to a church, belonging to a mosque. And a determination around that often requires a certain kind of sacrifice of things, of other things. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
So one of the things I grapple with is, what have we lost? And what is really of God, and what is called of God because it's Western, but there might be other things that are of God that we let go of. But I think the most poignant memory was when I was 9. I joined a club at school, after school club, and it was called African Music, or African Music and African Dance. And I remember there was, I think his name was Wanzira, I don't even remember his name, but he taught us a dance from where my mother comes from. And they didn't play drums, they played pots called zinyungu. They had these clay pots, and he hit it with a wad of banana fiber and his elbow, and the banana fiber and his elbow. And there was this song, and there was a dance, and it was kind of like you bent and you danced almost close to the ground. And it was a funeral dance, it was a dirge. And I remember something moved in me, and I went home and I told my mom about it, and I was so excited about it. But we never mastered the dance because he disappeared. He stopped coming, so the club fell apart, and that was that. And I remember at my mother's funeral, in fact, before my mother's funeral, my sister had written about my grandmother's funeral and how my grandmother died when we had just gotten to Kenya, and my mom managed to go for the funeral. There's a whole poem about that, so I won't go into that. But my sister was in Uganda, and she was at the funeral, and they were waiting for my mother to come. And she wrote something about this old lady who was standing there, my grandmother's peer, dancing this dance and singing this song. And that reminded me of my teacher. And when but nobody I know knows that dance. Nobody I know knows the song. And I think it's because of the church. It was seen as not of God. But I think grief is visceral. You feel grief in your body. Your head never understands grief. Your body knows grief. And when my mother died, I so wanted to dance my grief and my farewell to her. I never did because I didn't know the dance. I sang instead. But that's part of the journey of saying, what have we lost? Because grief and the grieving process are so important. And we don't, we let go of some of these practices in this modern world because we think it's right. But I think we then grieve. That also adds to that dislocated grieving. And so there is a part of me that's on this journey of questioning what have we lost and what have we let go of that might have been a good thing. But we threw the baby out with the bathwater, and what do I need in my life now? And I don't know how I'm going to recreate those things, but I'm looking and I'm listening, and who knows?
And dancing.
And dancing, yes.
Thank you, Philippa. We'll end with the last poem in Limbo.
Which is the first one.
Yes.
She's done this back to front, so
She had a few weeks to switch it around.
I picked up the broken notes and sang them back together, crooning in a low voice. And I marveled at the beauty of such brokenness. And then, boom, the song splintered again. The notes scattered into the ether. And for a while I tried to piece the melody together, find the chords that bound it. But somehow the center kept straying and the sense of emptiness seeped in. And now each note is tentative again. My ears prick up, listening for the alarm bells, anticipating another interruption from the choir master's baton, afraid to open up in full voice in case this triggers the next discordant mess. I am in limbo, in the nothingness between notes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Deirdre and Philippa. Are you going to record your book? I love listening to you talk through your poems and your stories.
I hadn't thought of that, but I am very much an oral person and believe in the oral tradition. So, yes, I will explore that.
I'm not going to ask a question, but I have another suggestion of your book now. When she asked if you're going to record it, I see a feeling there. Let's bring this child to life. Let's bring this child growing up in that home, in that environment up until she's today. And let the whole world see her in film. Please, we'll talk after this.
Thanks.
Sure. Anybody else for questions? Sorry, Nance?
the thing about writing your memoir and writing your story is now you've done it, but your life goes on. Have you sort of drawn a line? Is that it? You've dealt with it, now it's gone? Or have you sort of dug up all sorts of things that need further exploring? Or are you busy with the next chapter of your life?
Well, first of all, birthing a book is like birthing a child. I've just realized. I didn't know. Now you have to start promoting it. So I thought it's done.
No, it's never
You know,
done.
and now exactly. So I'm starting again. But I think what this is, I want to perform. So maybe, you know, but I want to sing also because that's my other love. So it's wakened that in me, and it's triggered conversations with my cousins. You know, like the things I try and remember, then on the WhatsApp group I say this, I throw that in. And now they're reading the book and they're contesting things or they but I think I want to create spaces and invite people, African people, people from the continent in particular, to write their stories, to have our history. You know, I mean, I don't know what history is. I think history you have to corroborate, but this is also a history, and I think we have so much and such richness, and I think that there's something about that, and knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, that makes you stand a little bit taller, that makes you able to handle what life throws at you. And that is the gift that we can leave for our children. So I want to be part of a movement that does that. I don't know how, but you know, sometimes you just say, and I'm saying it, and I'm so scared. You say things and they happen, eh? But yes.
I just want to say thank you to you, Philippa, because we live not too far from each other, and I'm very, very proud of you. We both live very near to you. And I think this opens up, there's this need in our country, in our community, that we need to look within ourselves. There's diversity, we talk about diversity, but do we really embrace it? And that you have brought your heritage to Cape Town now from Uganda. I can't wait to read the book. I want to know more about Uganda. I want to know more about the rest of Africa. My schooling, our schooling, it's deprived us from that. And I thank God for people like you who've come out and been so brave and so vulnerable. Open yourself for all of us to see and to hear. And may this begin the beginning of many more stories from all over Africa living in Cape Town.
Thank you, Masha.
Any more questions? Comments? Malika.
So, sister, it's a temptation not to break out in song and dance. In celebration! Woo! Sure. So, your baby is so beautiful, and you often remind me about being in Ndlovu. The duration of an elephant pregnancy cannot be compared to that of a dog,
Yes.
or a human for that matter. So the idea of the struggle with being in that state of gestation and questioning the worthiness of what is to come, and does it, you know, how it will be received in the world. Having different kinds of connections with your book and with you and with your life and your family and your work. For me, the question about where's that line, is that we are dying and rebirthing ourselves all the time, and there's fluidity in it, and grief is a powerful way to understand how little we have control about when those boundaries are held or fall apart. But I think a lot about my mother when I listen to the ways in which the sense of responsibility that you spoke to about, you're not only writing your story when you write. You're not even only writing forward so that your children have something to connect umbilically to the places we come from. You're also writing for the ones who were not given permission to write, who doubt themselves into a point of paralysis at 80 years old, or Alzheimer's, or all kinds of illness that stop us from a composite sense of self, but also remembering, and then let alone having voice in a time like this, as if aging equals invisibility and silence. And so I thank you for that, because there is a ticking clock on some level to do it now while it can be heard and reread. Yeah, there is an urgency about it, but to know that it's enough. The book, it is a poem in the sense that it's incomplete sentences. We will never write the complete biography. That is a very masculine notion. This movement is about being fragments and reconstructing that mosaic, and your poetry does that, your songs do that, and I'm so glad that this phenomenal press allowed you permission to use those multiple modalities in one publication, because that's another very anal way historically that publishers have said, no, but it's too fluid, it's got all these different voices, it's got fragments of song and poetry and dialogue, so therefore we don't know how to sell that. Honey, we know how to sell that. Let us do that job. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really interesting because there's some stories that just wanted to be told in a poem. I could not tell that story in a different way. And you could tell a very long story in a very short space. And some needed prose.
Sorry, I'm conscious that we could be talking here for a long time because there's a lot to say, but just very, very quickly, I'm with Malika, I can't help feeling that there's a song coming along here. But, you know, we're all sitting here sort of in awe of the fact that you can write poetry, the fact that you can write, that you've got the whole thing together. There are a lot of us who can't really write and would think, I don't even know where to start with my story already. Just one tip, a couple of tips, how did you actually begin? Do you sit down with yourself, make an appointment for the memories and just let it... How?
You start. You just start. You find a book that you like. I like blank books. I hate books with lines. I write all over the place. I put them onto my computer. I remember a fragment of a memory. I work with it. I ask someone about it. And then you've got all these fragments. And then, well, that's my process. Let me first, my process is I start from the fragments and then I put it all together and I work organically. I have a friend who plans it, and she says, I'm going to write about this part of my life and it's going to be like this in chapter 1 and chapter 7 and chapter 8 and it's going to end like this and the cover's going to look like this, and she prints the cover and sticks it up on front so the book is finished and she writes. So it's about finding what works for you. There is no one way, and it takes time. It's not going to take, it's not 3 years of work, but it's 3 when I started putting it into the book. But some of these things go back maybe 6-7 years ago. So it takes time, but that's life. Life takes time, you know. So just start. And then you get mentors, get teachers, get people to help you, get people to read. Your writing only grows when other people read and give you feedback. And then it's your choice. You can say, I don't want it, or I'm going to take it. And then you work with it.
And we are planning to do a writing workshop.
Hi, Philippa. I just want to tell you I'm so in awe of you and your book and the way you speak and the way you sing those songs. I won't be able to buy your book because I need you to do that for me, because I won't be able to sing it or say it or speak it the same way you do. And so I just want to ask you, I'm on my own journey where I also need to tell my story, and I'm so emotional because I'm like, how did you do it? Were there times when you felt like you were too emotional on certain issues? Because I'm like, I want to cry for you.
I cried, I laughed, I put it down and didn't look at it for months. I came back to it. There are certain stories that were very painful that I wrote and processed and realized I'm not yet ready to put them out in the world, or they belong to more than me and other people, and I haven't processed it with those people, and therefore I I cannot put it out in the world. But the writing of it and the processing of it also enabled me to put that to rest and say, okay, it's not to be put out in the world, but I can let it go. It's good. It's okay. And that's the thing. Yes, you must cry. You must laugh. That's part of the process. It's a healing. It's a letting go. It's a, yeah. Anybody who's written will tell you that. You must hate the book and throw it away and say, I'll never look at it again.
I am so inspired, and what inspired me today was that you said that the ordinariness, that you must value the ordinariness, and that for me is just so empowering, because I've been writing journals since 1980. No, sorry, 1978. My English teacher at the time read my comprehension at that time and then said, you need to keep a diary. And I didn't even know at that time what the diary was. But then I started writing, and my husband always says, I write dear letters to God, that is what I call it. And then my husband says, God is going to punish you because you're using his name in vain all the time. And then I started working and I forgot about writing, and then I read The Artist's Way again, because I was trying to find my way. And I started writing again. But nothing, it was just writing. And then I thought of writing a book. I started with something, snippets of life. So like you, little memories of my life, I wrote, but it's just there. And coming here today has actually inspired me to look for that mentor. And then finding somebody to read what I've written. I mean, it's not great English, but it's my life. And what I've discovered this morning, actually, I decided in the week that I'm going to come, because I am on the mailing list, but I just never came. But I don't know what in this week, I just decided that if I want something different for my life, I need to do something different. And that is what made me come this morning. I thought, I'm not going to stay in my pajamas, I'm going to get up and put on my clothes. Yes! If I'm going to stay in my pajamas, I'm never ever going to leave the house. So that is why I came. And I mean, I just think it was the right time for me to be here. And I'm hoping that I will find a mentor today to look at what I've written and then just see if it's worth being put in a book. So thank you very much for your, and I love the way you read. Yeah. Thank you.
And do it, and all the best. This has probably gone through 100 drafts. So you will write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until you know. And when you feel you're ready, then you probably will tomorrow feel like you're not ready, but then you must let it go. But you will go through 100 drafts, and that's all part of the process.
Mine, Philippa, is to say congratulations. It's a beautiful book, it's a beautiful journey. It's amazing to be able to listen to you in this form, because I've listened to you so many times, and when things come together in this form, it really is, it's such a big deal. And for me, it's just so important for you to be writing this right now. Mainly because when we lose those things of who we are, in a sense of home, we become other people.
Yeah.
And when you revive them, you revive a part of your journey that is constantly forgotten. And you're recreating your own history, and it's such a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing for this time in South Africa. To be a black woman doing that is very, very immensely powerful. So congratulations, it's beautiful. Thank you.
And it really has, this is really, as you've heard, it's been born right here, right now, because of, and I love the hoe, the chalk, which way, one way or another we all hold many different hoes and much different chalks. Because it is woman's own tradition, we're going to close with a song, chanson, from friend Philippa here, which we're all going to sing.
It is in English.
Oh. Yes. But you could sing it in whatever language.
I am a tower of strength within and without. I am a tower of strength within. Sing again. I am a tower of strength within and without. I am a tower of strength within. All my troubles drop away, drop away. All fear falls from my heart. All my troubles drop away, drop away. All fear falls from my heart. All my shackles are loosened. All my shackles are loose. All my shackles are loosened. All my shackles are loose.
Thank you very much. Travel safely. Don't forget to write your name down and your email address so that we can read it if you'd like to join us again. Thank you. And if you want to buy the books, CDs, they're all over there. Snap scan available.
I am a tower of strength within and without. I am a tower of strength within. Sing again. I am a tower of strength within and without. I am a tower of strength within.